This podcast is part of the Deluxe Edition Network. To find other great shows on the network, head over to deluxeeditionnetwork.com. That's deluxeeditionnetwork.com.
Kindness. We see it all around us. We see it when someone pays for someone else's coffee or holds the door open for another person. We see it in the smallest of gestures, like a smile or a kind word. But it's different when we turn on the news or social media. Oftentimes, what we hear about, what outlets are pushing, is the opposite of kind. Welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast. Our goal is to give you a place to relax, to revel in stories of people who have received or given kindness, a place to inspire and motivate each and every one of us to practice kindness every day. Hello and welcome to the Kindness Matters podcast, everybody. I am your host, Mike Rathbun. A couple of things before we get into our show. It's going to be a fantastic show, by the way. Spoiler alert. As you heard in the intro, I am affiliated with the Deluxe Edition Network, and they have two amazing podcasts on their Podcast of the Month this month. First up, Barrel Aged Chicks. Are you a fan of the Barrel Aged Flicks podcast? Are you into movies, pop culture, comedy? Are you curious about what the chicks think? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then you have to check out Barrel Aged Chicks podcast. Come meet Sammy, Snow, Crystal, Harley, and Yen as they give you the chick perspective on movies and so much more. Also this month, check out the Barstool Film School, a conversational comedy breakdown of some of your favorite flicks, old and new. Each episode, hosts Dylan Quarles and Cameron Roberts take on your favorite flicks to determine if they pass the bar and join the ranks of truly excellent bar movies. Lastly, make sure to check out the show notes where you'll find links and discount codes for two companies I've partnered with. Sunday Scaries, a company that makes broad-spectrum CBD gummies, and Coffee Bros that make, well, an amazing blend of coffees. I use both of these products, and they are nothing short of amazing. And now, let's get into the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. My guest today is an energetic catalyst and fearless communicator who sparks leaders to find, use, and share their voice through coaching, podcasts, and publications so they can go from fear to fired up about their life and business. She is the author of How to Get Your Life Back, a certified fearless living coach and trainer, a master practitioner of NLP, and the co-founder of the First Fire Starters book project. Welcome to the show, Shay Sparks. Yay! Hi!
Hi, thanks for having me, Mike. I'm excited to be here.
And you know, I'm glad you're excited. I'll say that. That doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of who you are.
Thank you.
You are involved in so much. I get worn out just thinking about all the things that you're into.
Thank you. It's
Holy cow.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm the chief
Where do you
excitement
find
officer, right? I'm excited about life. I said that's why I'm the chief excitement officer. I'm excited about my life.
I guess so.
Yeah.
And I'm excited just because you're here, because it's fantastic. So what do we talk about first? First and foremost, you have your own coaching business, right?
Yes.
And that can be found at shaysparks.com.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, everything we talk about here, if there's a website to it, it'll be linked in the show notes. So I'm not going to get too excited about mentioning .com or wherever it might pop up. But what drives Shay Sparks?
Good question. How do I want to answer that? I would have to say it depends on the day, for
Sure.
the most part. However, in this moment of time, what drives me is the deep down burning desire that I pay it forward, so to speak, in repaying God for taking me out of a traumatic relationship.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So
That's, go ahead.
I was going to say, so if you want me to elaborate, I can.
Yeah, you brought it up, so what's going on there?
Yeah. So I was in an abusive relationship for 12 years, and it was physical, emotional, mental, financial, and abuse. And I found myself praying for him for most of the relationship. And one day it clicked to pray for me. And it wasn't like it's not like the movies. All of a sudden, everything's now in Technicolor. But what ended up happening is things started to shift, and I started to really lean into listening to God's voice for my direction for my life. We'll put it that way. And
Okay.
he was actually in a car accident. That's how I was able to get away. And
Oh,
then I started counseling immediately, literally within the first week, and then was able to. He was still alive. He was in a coma with brain damage, and I was able to use my voice with even a whisper. You know how they say if you can't say it loud, just start with a whisper. That was my whisper.
right.
By saying, being honest and authentic and saying the word abuse. And before that, I had never used that. And I was able to share that with his family and basically break up with his family and walk away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so. Do you credit the counseling with getting you to that point where you were able to do that?
Absolutely. My Christian counselor was really monumental in bringing to my awareness that I was abused in the first place. I had kind of thought that, but I never saw myself as a quote unquote victim. And so I refused to take ownership of that word and to label myself as quote unquote one of those women, right? And
Right.
I fought back. I wasn't. It's not like the movies ever, right? At all.
Right.
And there were days where it was just screaming and yelling and uh, spitting because there was so much screaming and yelling as I'm standing there receiving the hours long of all of the horrific things that he would call me and say to me and all the things, put me down. And those hurt worse than the physical. Those
Oh,
those tear your soul apart more than the physical. And so
right.
here I am now with the counselor. And when I was whispering in that first session what was happening, he said, "You were abused." And I said, "Abused?" And he said, "Yes, you were abused. It's okay to admit that out loud." And I went, huh. Like that thought had never even
Yeah.
occurred to me. And over the course of time, I started to heal along this healing journey. Was with him every week. Actually, several times. First several weeks was twice a week because I felt so lost and so confused, and I had grief and relief because even though he was abusive, he was also my best friend in the good times. So there was just a whole bag of emotions going on, and I really wanted support and clarity and a soft place to be. And that amazing counselor really created that for me. And he gave me
Wow.
permission of things that I didn't realize I needed, like letting go, breaking up with his
Okay.
family, saying what I experienced was abuse, things like that. And over the course of this several month period, I and professionally, I'm a hairstylist. So
Oh,
everyone tells me everything about their life, right? And I, at this point, started to realize that I didn't really say much about my own life because I was hiding,
sure.
right? I was wearing my mask and not letting anyone in to know what was really going on. So as I started to heal and became more brave and courageous in being vulnerable and sharing what was happening with me, I was also sharing what I was learning about me. And
Ah,
so then they were like, so it was like a conversation of normal of, so what's new, what's going on, what's happening in your life? And they would tell me, and then they would go, well, okay, well, tell me about you. I've been on the edge of my seat for the last, 4 to 6 weeks, waiting for you to tell me about you. And I'm like, oh, you're never going to believe what I learned
buckle
about
up, Buttercup.
myself. Yeah. Let me tell you about myself. I am afraid to actually be honest and say what I mean and mean what I say and not be sarcastic. And they were like, what? What does that mean? And I said, well, sarcasm is really anger in a clown suit. And I
Oh,
grew up in a house with all this anger and masking it in trying to mask it in humor. And I realized that I didn't need to do that. I had been doing that, and I don't need to do that. I can just say what's going on with me, and how it lands with the
yeah.
other person is up to them. It's not up to me to take ownership for them. And they were like, wait, what? And so, and they're like, how did you come to this? Like, and how, I like, what do I do about it? And I'm like, well, I learned that it takes just a tiny bit of courage to whisper and to say it softly, even if you have to say it softly. You just have to say it. And you have to
Yeah.
be okay with being uncomfortable in being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And 4 to 6 weeks go by, and they come back and they're like, oh my gosh, because of what you said, it shifted my relationship with my team, my boss, my spouse, my kids, my parents. And have you considered, then they started to speak life into me. Have you considered writing a book, starting a podcast, becoming a
Ah,
speaker? And over time, I got so much of this amazing encouragement that I never had before. I didn't have anyone speak life into me before. So it was really nice to be able to go, I mean, I would like to do those things, but I don't really think I can do those things. And again, at the
yeah.
time, I took some sage advice from someone who said, what if you just borrowed their confidence in you and did it anyway?
Borrowed.
You went down that route. And I thought, you're right, because what's the worst that can happen? I learned new skills. I can always continue to do hair. It was just, let me see what happens. And so here I am now doing all the things and retired from doing hair.
Just briefly, I want to have ask a question. I have known women who have been in abusive relationships, and almost to a person, either they knew they were in an abusive relationship, but were afraid to call it out
Yeah.
for what it was,
Yeah.
or they, like yourself, they just didn't even realize it was abuse. Is that typical in your experience?
Yes. So I read this book called Women Who Love Too Much, which honestly, for your audience, it could be called People Who Love Too Hard because it applies to men too. Um,
Sure.
it's a fantastic book for everyone. And what that book taught me was that the reason we're in the relationships we are, whether they're abusive or not, is because it's familiar.
Oh, interesting.
So from that, I really got the phrase. One of my phrases that I use is that our childhood experiences shape our adult decisions.
Hmm.
So if you only know the 5 mile radius that you live in, then you have no idea that there might be beautiful parks and lakes and things, forest on the other side and in 6 mile or mile 10 or 20, right? You only know that 5 mile
Sure.
radius. So think about it from that point of view. If you only know the house that you grew up in,
Exactly.
you don't know anything else. Whew, I got the chills on that. You don't know any different. You don't know that it's possible to have what is a different what the different kind of love looks like healthy, because you didn't know that your love that you lived in your house was unhealthy.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really deep.
Yeah.
So here you are, and you're sharing your experiences and what you've learned with your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody says, you should write a book.
Mm.
And you went, no, I can't. And then somebody talked you into writing it. Was that the book that we talked about?
Yeah. How to get your voice
where
back.
is it?
How to get
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Was that your first book?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How did you find the writing experience? Did you enjoy it? The process?
Absolutely. So I have been journaling in middle school and high school. We had to do that for English class, right? Journal. And I hated it. Hated the exercise. And one day I'm in this abusive relationship, and I was started after many, many, many years of experiencing all these symptoms and going to different doctors. I couldn't tell you, umpteen doctors, and never got any answers. I started going to acupuncture. And I was going to acupuncture. I kept getting this whisper, if you will, in a nudge that said, you should journal. Pick up a notebook and start writing. Doesn't matter what it is, just start writing.
Okay.
And so I started journaling. And in that first journal, I call it a brain dump. It was, I don't know what I'm doing. This is so stupid. I can't believe I'm doing this again. I hated this in school, blah, blah, blah. Right. And just let it all out. Whatever my thoughts were, is just letting it all out. What I didn't realize was that that's part of not only my healing process, but the healing journey for so many people. And my first book is actually a journal prompt book.
Oh, okay.
And so it started as I would be at work in the salon. Someone asked me a question, and it would stir a story. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go write this story. I would go home and write this chapter. And as I'm writing these different chapters that people would ask me questions, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that experience. Oh yeah, I forgot about that experience. All of a sudden I had, again, a whisper, a nudge, somebody, for me, it's an alignment with God that said,
okay,
this isn't your first book. And I said, okay, got it. And I put it down and I walked away. What I didn't know what was happening next was it was time for me to take care of my mother.
We are going to be right back with more of my conversation with Shay Sparks. But first, here's a message from another Deluxe Edition Network podcast.
Are you looking for a place for all things horror and don't know where to go?
Well, you've came to the right place, my friend. We are the Graveyard Club podcast. For all your horror needs, visit us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can follow us over on Instagram at the Graveyard Club Pod. See you there.
Ciao.
And she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And so I let go of writing a book, the thought of writing a book. And then one day, and I think it was even maybe a year after she had passed away, I had hired a coach to help me with my coaching business. And he said, well, what you need to do is you need to write what's going to be on your website. And I was like, well, isn't that why I hired you? Because that's where I'm stuck, is figuring out what to write on my website. And so one day after at work, I think I was done early at noon or something one day. And again, I got this whisper from above that said, grab your laptop and go to a coffee shop and write today. I went, okay. And I go, and the weather was gorgeous. And so I opted to sit outside, and the internet did not reach outside. So I said, well, I'm not going to be able to pull up this Google Doc that I've been working on. So I'm just going to pull up a Word document and go, okay, here's my book. Or not even here's my book. Okay, pull up a Word document. And I started writing, started the same kind of brain dump journaling type of writing. And I said, what do you want? Like, kind of looked up and said, okay, God, what do you want me to write today? And 6 hours later, I sat back and I went, holy cow.
Oof.
I think I just wrote a book. I think I just wrote my first book. What, really? And and prior to that, my accountant, of all people, had so I think this was like August. So in January of that year, my accountant had asked me if I would be willing to do this event at this battered women's shelter where she was putting on, she was also a speaker as well and an entrepreneur coach. And so she was putting on this conference, but she wanted to do this event that tied into this event at the battered women's shelter. And she said, we're doing a kind of a day of beauty. Would you be willing to do the White Sisters hair at this battered women's shelter? And I said, absolutely. I said, did I ever tell you that I was in an abusive relationship? And she's like, what? No. Oh my God, you need to share your story. And I said, okay. And so I shared my story. I literally wrote it down. And what I wrote was about a paragraph of all the stuff that happened to me and the rest of it of why it's important to heal. And I spoke, and she came up to me afterwards and she's like, you just don't have a book in there. You have an entire series. And
you got a whole library in there.
Yeah. And so to just have people like that encouraging me after that event, the next morning I'm driving to work and I'm like, I'm not even driving to work. Let me back up. I'm in the shower because, sometimes you have the best ideas in the shower, right?
Best ideas come from the shower.
And I'm in the shower.
Absolutely.
And all of a sudden this phrase, how to get your voice back, came up. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to write that down. And I literally wrote it down on a sticky note and kept it in my drawer of my bathroom and had forgot about it. And then once I sat back at this coffee shop and was looking at all these words on this Word doc, and I was like, I think I wrote a book. And I was like, well, what would I call it? How to Get Your Voice Back. And I was like,
How to Get Your Voice Back.
Oh, got it. So it's journal prompts that God really helped me, that really helped me rewire my brain from all the negativity from not just my ex, but from my home, and how I'm able to it helped me propel me forward.
That's amazing. That's so you basically went from hairstylist and doing the hair of the white women at this conference to being a speaker almost accidentally.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I never looked at it that way, but you're right. Yes.
And you never looked back.
Yeah. Yes.
And you've gone forward. I mean, you're a successful coach. You're a successful author. And somehow you get involved with all of these kindness initiatives. So you have, how many podcasts do you have currently?
So as of right now,
I was trying to count them and I lost them.
I only have 2. But at one time I had 3, and was talking about starting a 4th. So right now 2 have gone kind of on hiatus for the time being, and I have 2 at the moment.
Okay, so Imagine Kindness is one.
Imagine Kindness is one, yes. And then the Shay Sparks Show is the other one.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to set aside the kindness for a second. Talk to me about the Fire Starters book project, because that's really fascinating to me.
Yeah. So it goes back to that first book. I hired a self-publishing coach, and he was amazing. And he asked me if let me back up. It goes even further than that. But the quick version is another coach approached me about this co-author idea, and I had so many ideas with it. I took it we were collaborating with my self-publishing coach. The other coach decided to back out, and I said to the co-author, or to the self-publishing coach, I'm like, well, that's your forte, so have at it. And he came out with the book called Visionistas, and so he asked me to be a part of it. And then this is in 2020 now. And
Okay.
within 2 months, of course. So I was there in Houston doing our book launch for Visitionistas. And 2 months later, we're shut down. And him and I are on a call, and he's like, "You're different." And I'm like, "I'm different." Well, my entire business is shut down because hairstylists were non-essential, right? And I'm like, I kind of am not
Right.
really sure what I'm doing and with my life right now. And he said, "Well, have you considered facilitating your own co-author book?" And I was like, "Oh, well, if I do, the first one, it'd be called Firestarters Book Project. And the first one would be called How to Be a Spark of Hope in the Midst of Change." Done. There we go.
No, hadn't thought of it at all.
No, but that's so funny. I literally hadn't thought of it. Just by him saying that, it's like all of a sudden this idea just came flowing through me. And I got off that Zoom call with him, and it again just flowed out of me, and I was just writing it down. And it's not just how to be a spark of hope in the midst of kindness. It's rekindling your kindness. What the world needs now is the next collection, the next book, along with 15 other titles. And it was like, wow, like there's something here that I think that's really can be impactful on the world. And why not? Why not go with it and see what happens? And so instead of focusing on, like, if you write a book, a lot of times they say focus on your target audience. And there's a book called Chicken Soup for the Souls, right? You might have heard of it.
Right. Everybody's heard of that one.
They have around for their target market, their target audience. Chicken Soup for the Soul for teachers, for military wives, for veterans, saying things like that. And I said, well, I know that's the norm, and I want to do something a little different. I want to take people from all walks of life and talk about the same theme. And so How to Be a Spark of Hope has 2 chief master sergeants from the Air Force, life coaches, a Navy submarine veteran, and podcasters and marketing gurus, and like the gamut of people. And so now the next book, Rekindle Your Kindness, What the World Needs Now, we're actually looking for new co-authors, creative thought leaders who want to be a part of this, who really have a like I said before, a burning passion to really make an impact on the world to be a better place. And it really is about sharing your personal story of kindness and how it inspired, or something that inspired you around that, and how to inspire someone in that. Because, I mean, to think of what we've gone through as a globe, as right, the whole world.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't limited to just the U.S.
in the last 4 years. It's been a lot.
For sure.
And it's like, let's dive into the compassion and the empathy and the love and the community and the kindness of what we all long for.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I was talking with a friend the other day, and the whole reason I wanted to start this podcast in the first place was, if you look in the world, and it's kind of the whole thing, like you were talking about, just if you look in your general area. But if you look at the news and your social media feeds, you don't see that necessarily everyday kindness.
Right.
But when you start to look for it, you see it everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was in a really dark place with my first podcast because I was doing current events. So I was talking about those things, right?
Yeah.
I see by the look on your face. I was talking about mask mandates and Christian nationalism and policing in the era of George Floyd and all of those hot button topics. And I spent about a year doing that. Oof. And I was always angry. I was always depressed. I was always sad. I said, you can't do that anymore, right?
Yeah.
But once I started focusing my attention on, and I said to myself, what this world needs is more kindness. And once I started focusing on that and looking specifically for kindness, and I found it everywhere, you're a good example of that. And it has made such an impact on my mental health.
Yes.
And so, yeah, you're right. It's the one thing that the world needs more than anything else today, I think, is just to be more aware of kindness in the world.
Yeah. So,
And talk to me about imagined kindness.
well, I just want to hit on a point what you just said. So
Oh,
you
okay.
you we are a reflection of what we see, right? And so if we're only consuming the current events, the negativity, then it will
Right.
consume us. So I'm so
Absolutely.
glad that you pointed out that you really seeked out the positivity, the kindness, the love in the world, even when there were so many dark times that it seemed like there was no love in the world. So kudos to
Yeah.
you, and kudos for your audience for really being a participant in that as well, because they seek out your amazing podcast on that topic, right? So that's fantastic. So imagine kindness. I met my co-host. I'm sorry, amplify kindness. Let me back up.
Amplify. Sorry.
Yeah, amplify kindness is
I
our
apologize.
no, it's all good. Amplify Kindness is our podcast that my co-host and one of my very dear sister friends, Lindsay Andriotti, and I started. We had met 2 years ago, or actually, we met 3 years ago. A mutual friend introduced us over the phone, and at the time, I was living
Okay.
in Florida, or in the time I was living in Kansas City, I had the idea of moving to Florida, but wasn't sure. And so she lived in Florida in Daytona Beach, and really, got to know her. And immediately we were kindred spirits from the start. And
That's nice.
then I moved here and we started hanging out. And it was like, of course, we're going to create a show together around kindness. It makes sense. But before we did that, we were on another show that there was two other co-hosts, and it was called Underwired, and it was to uplift and support women everywhere. And
Ah,
and we loved that because we really talked about the positivity, right? Like, I know that there's a
sure.
lot going on, so let's give you the break in the world of the kindness, the love, the community, and leaning into something positive to look forward to. And so we actually got picked up by an online network called United Network News, and we were on that for, I don't even know, several seasons. And then it just went on hiatus. Some things changed at the network, and it's like, okay, we just have to pause on this right now. We'll revisit it at some point. We just don't know when. And so Lindsay and I see each other on a regular basis, and we were like, I really want to do a podcast, and I said, I know, me too, and I love kind. And she's like, I love kindness. I'm like, I love kindness, and she's like, well, let's talk about this. And it just kind of fell into place. But in the meantime, what also fell into place was this amazingness of things that I cannot wait for her to tell you the whole entire story. But she had the idea of creating some sort of like kindness jam sessions where musicians kind of
Oh,
come together and play, and we spread the message of kindness, right? Kind of like Live Aid, but only
cool.
about kindness. And I said, I love that. And so then she got introduced to a person who makes amplifiers, and playing off the words, she's like, what if it's amplify kindness? I said, absolutely. It's amplify kindness. And so one of the many things that we talk about on the podcast is, how did music, like what song or what group really played a part in your kindness journey? Like, was there something that really impacted you? And it's it's just a different twist, bringing kindness and music together inside a
Yeah.
podcast, but so
Oh,
really
for sure.
talking about how people are putting kindness into the world.
That's amazing. That's fantastic. We're there's a group up by me called the Minnesota Kindness Alliance, and they're doing,
Mm.
well, the whole year is about kindness, and every month there are certain goals and stuff. But on May 18th, they're doing a Make a Difference Day.
Mm.
Yep. Make a Difference Day. And that's going to be so much fun. I've been invited to go. I'm not speaking, but Brian, I can't remember his last name. He's Be the Nice Kid. Are you familiar with Brian? Anyway.
I love that for you.
Um,
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And you're not speaking, but let me just say this. You're not speaking yet.
Do you know something I don't?
No, but I just...
You know what? And they wanted me to do a podcast from the event.
Yes.
But I don't have any remote equipment. I was watching you and Lindsay in the coffee shop.
Yes.
On one of those, and I'm like, what is that they're using?
Yeah, well, we had just our phone, but I will tell you, when we get done recording, I can share all kinds of little tools with you about what
I looked, I found some, but the phone I have doesn't have a space for a SD card.
Okay. No, I have other tricks for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was so great. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this, because really the more we can amplify kindness, I think the better the world is. And I'm going to have all of your links in the show notes, as I said earlier.
Thank you.
Your podcast, your website, everything. I highly encourage anybody that wants a little kindness boost or just needs a little fearlessness to reach out and contact you. And thank you so much for coming on today, Shay. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And Mike, I just want to say thank you for tapping into your divine calling and talking about kindness, because you could have continued down that path of current events and the depression, and then started drinking or something else, right? Like so many people do.
Yeah.
And instead,
yes,
you know what? I need to take a step back and listen to what I'm being guided to. And you chose such a beautiful topic, and your show shows it. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're doing, and we're going to stay in touch, and let's make great things happen.
Yeah.
That was such an amazing conversation. I so appreciate Shay Sparks, and what she brings to this world is just so uplifting and so amazing. I encourage you to check out the show notes. All of her links are there for her website and her podcasts. And that was fantastic. I feel better. I feel uplifted. I feel inspired. I feel motivated just talking to her. I hope you take away something positive from this show too. I really, really appreciate Shay Sparks. That will do it for this episode of the Kindness Matters podcast. We will be back, of course, next week with a brand new episode. But in the meantime, be that person who roots for others, who tells a stranger they look amazing, and encourages others to believe in themselves and their dreams. You have been listening to the Kindness Matters podcast. Please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, everywhere you can find us. We're on Facebook. I am your host, Mike Rathbun. Have a fantastic week.